Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Monday Acceleration. You know, I wanted to talk
Good
today.
morning.
Good morning. And we'll see if Cam is able to show up. I just got back. Cam and I were working with an association. Last week they had their annual shindig down in Florida, and you know, and I look at where business comes from. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways to go about this industry, and there's good ways, bad ways, not so great ways, and phenomenal ways. And I had the pleasure of working with Cam this weekend, and I know you guys have heard him on the call before. And Cam truly is a wonderful expert on working with associations. And I got to see him work for the last 4 days at this association. And some things kind of trigger. You kind of think about, okay, you know, what's the value of joint ventures? And, you know, joint ventures, I think we'd all agree, right, that a warm lead's better than a cold one? A
Definitely,
referral?
right.
You know, is much, much better. And Cam's had this association for about 4 years, and we talked a lot about why do you think why is this so successful? And he says, you know, because because I know everybody in the group. And you could clearly see that when we're working the booth and people are coming by and they're asking questions, you know, they're calling him by name. He knows them by name. And this one association yields him about $4,000 a month, and he has a handful of different associations. And you know, I think we get lost a little bit on really he's not selling it by price. And I think in any joint venture, the first thing that you have to understand is one, I got to get in and build great rapport with the executive director. That's typically the point person at an association or a nonprofit is the ED. So you always go, who do I talk to? I get that question a lot. So I always want to go for the executive director. That's their job, is to handle things like that. In joint ventures, like an association, for an example, why do you guys think that would be a good fit for an association, to have a relationship with someone like us? Let's think of some reasons. Why do you think it'd be a good fit?
Well, it's a benefit for their members.
Bingo. That's the biggest thing. Executive directors are constantly looking for benefits for their members, because people have to pay to belong to an association. So when I go to the association, in this case, they're going, okay, well, what benefits do I get by belonging to the association? And if you look at one of the longest running programs where people buy into is, look at like AAA. How long has AAA been around? I mean, my grandparents were on AAA when I was a kid. I mean, it had to be around, 50 years? In AAA, they're constantly promoting their benefits. You know, roadside assistance, you get cheaper travel, you get discounts here, you get discounts there. It's no different for associations. And one of the things that when we sat down, we were talking with the executive director, he says, you know what, I love about the way we're able to structure this, because we've really taken all the guesswork out for our doctors. Because doctors are doctors. They're not merchant account salespeople, and they don't understand merchant accounts. And really, cost wasn't as big of an issue as easeability for their members, knowing that their members are working with a trustworthy company, knowing that their members are getting the service that they deserve, and yeah, pricing was in there. So when you're approaching these joint ventures, instead of saying, you know, the biggest thing that I saw was not approaching them going, look, it's all about, we have the cheapest rate in town. It's not about having the cheapest rate. It's like, look, what value can we bring to your members? Because the more value, you bring to the members, the easier it is for them to collect their association dues. Would you belong to an association that didn't have any benefits?
No.
No, heck no. You go, why would I belong? So promote it, and the avenue of getting in there is going, look, let us bring value to your membership. And so one of the things that I recommend doing when you're working with these babies from an association's perspective, ask them what value do they bring to their members now. Or maybe get online, do a little research, go, okay, let's pretend that I'm a dentist and I have the Minnesota Dental Association. What do I get as a dentist by belonging to the Minnesota Dental Association? In another avenue that we went through with these joint ventures is, sure, they're getting compensated. Okay, when we board accounts, they're earning some residuals per month on their business. We're one of their biggest contributors today, which when you're a bigger contributor for an association, you get more perks as well. And in part of that spin to the merchant was, look, process with this company, they do compensate us, they give back to the association. That helps us keep your membership dues down. Because as we bring more benefits that cost us money, we have to increase your annual membership. And a lot of these doctors belong to associations because they need to have so many continuing education credits every year. So the easiest way for them to get that is by belonging to the association. So if you look at the dynamics of it, it all kind of dovetails together. So when you're talking to a merchant, go, look, you know, A, we're going to put a little more money back in your pocket. B, you know that, you know, the association's done their due diligence. We're a good company. They support us, which is very important. We'll talk about in a second. And C, that by processing with us and us giving back to the association, that helps keep your membership dues down. I mean, you don't want your membership dues going up every year, do you?
No.
Of course, right. Excuse me. So when you're working these associations, there's some benefits in kind of the dynamics of what goes on. And then it's really important, and I think the reason why this one was so successful too, is the association's behind us 1,000%. The association emails all their members. Because when you think about that, if you're a member of an association, are you more likely to open the association's email, or are you more likely to open an email from First Financial, someone you haven't heard of yet? Probably the association, right? Yeah. And the association has a direct, you know, they'll have often the doctor's personal email, not the clinic's, the doctor's. So the doctor gets the email, you get exposure. Make sure that when you work with associations or joint ventures, if they do a newsletter, make sure we get in the newsletter. We can help you guys come up with copy, articles, things to put in the newsletter. Also, what we were able to do with this association is we got the names and phone numbers of every doctor. So what Cam was able to do was he was able to drip market via phone call, via marketing to every doctor in the association. I think there's 800 members. Chad, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's about 800 members in this association. And he makes about $4,000 a month, and I would say he's probably 30 to 35% of his way through it. So when this deal's all said and done, you know, this is going to be an $8,000 to $10,000 a month little relationship for him. And imagine that and multiplying that. And I asked him, I go, Cam, so again, why was this so successful? And he goes, I go to every one of the association's functions that I can. He goes, I'm present at every one. And what you'll find on different ones, different members show up. Some members never show up. There's some members always show up, but there's always a different flow of members coming through. So whenever they do a luncheon, he's often a guest speaker. He gave a presentation on the Clover while we were down there, and it was just 5-10 minute little presentation that he did prior to the meeting starting. And then when we had the booth, people were coming over asking more questions about it. And the Clover does things for them a terminal can't. It's not a Clover call, but a lot of these, you guys ever go to a doctor where they send you a text message like, hey, your appointment's next Thursday at X time? Or they send you an email? No, I'm the only one that does that. My chiropractor does that. They'll send me a text an hour before my appointment because they know if they don't send me a text an hour before my appointment, I'll get caught up doing stuff and I'll forget. So these are things that we can bring to the table for them. Instead of having 3 services to do some things, they can drill it down and have one. So the Clover was a real hot item for these guys down there, so they really appreciated that. And the doctor's office, great prospect for the Clover. So there's really the dynamics on the association piece. And joint ventures, I think all joint ventures work the same way. I know Brian, I heard him on the call, or Bruce on the call. These guys have relationships with banks that they work with that, you know, they're in there, they're talking to them, they're maintaining that relationship. You know, so when you establish a relationship, make sure that you continue that relationship. Keep following up with them. Drop by and see them. You know, because if you're not in there, you're out of sight, out of mind, right? So think about where can you get the best leverage for your time. And Brian, I heard you on the call, man. Let me ask you. Do you get when you worked your bank deals, and Bruce, I'd ask you the same question. When you guys worked your bank deals, is that like for the time you put in, how would you rank that as your return compared to going about it just, you know, knocking on doors?
Oh, I won't knock on doors.
Well, okay.
So I mean, because the return doing it the other way is so great, and listening to the association thing that Cam's doing reminds me of I did a couple of different Chamber of Commerce deals, you know, before the banks really took off. You know, where you go in there, you meet the people, you know, because they basically have an executive director of their local Chamber of Commerce. They have businesses that belong, they pay dues, same thing. They're looking for benefits, same thing. And, you know, I would say probably 75% of the businesses that belong to the Chamber take credit cards. You know,
right.
So if they can get a, you know, better service, better equipment, better pricing, better, you know, just be better. You don't have to be cheaper. You just got to be better. You know, that's the most important thing right there. And, you know, I went to the board meeting to this one, and there was 10 board members, and I wrote 6 of them 5 minutes after the meeting. They're standing there waiting. You know, so it's stuff that can be done, but you got to kind of think a little bit different than the average idiot running up and down the street knocking on doors, because that doesn't work.
Right. Like, beautifully put.
Hey, Chuck,
Yeah.
this is Bruce. I would say the bank customers are better quality.
In what way? Just out of curiosity, why would you say that?
They seem to be more astute. They're easy. You don't have to have as much discussion with them. They already kind of know what they need and what they want. And when the bank sends out the information, says this is the guy that does our processing, you don't have to go through and try to sell yourself.
Right,
it seems
exactly.
like there's more of an immediate trust. You know, I was telling Chad about a bank deal the customer that I had last week, and you know, I don't like to do this because I want to stay there and give them, but you know, it got to the point where they simply said, just tell me where to sign and you give me paperwork later. I trust you. Well, you know, I don't like to do that, but the point of it is that those clients are a lot more trustworthy, they're a lot more astute, and it's just a complete easier process than the rest of them.
Oh, it's painless.
Yeah.
Right. and obviously you get a lot more multiples when you do that as opposed to going to onesie twosie merchant.
Well, yeah, I just did one last month. I think we brought in 30 accounts.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and that's through one relationship. I didn't have to have 30 different, I guess, sales calls to do it. It is, you know, and that bank found out about me from another bank that I had worked with, because the bankers, they all go to the same meetings. They're in peer groups. They do stuff. And the guy says, hey, we're looking to get rid of this merchant services stuff because we don't understand it. We don't like it. This EMV is driving us crazy. You know, hey, buddy banker, who do you use? Oh, we use Brian. You know, I get a phone call, go do the deal. You know, it was that simple, but you got to lay all the groundwork. I mean, that stuff doesn't happen the first day.
Right. Interesting. Well, you know, I think in what you said, you don't have to be cheaper, but you have to be better. And what you'll find, especially and I'm sure you guys experience this too, when you deal with a merchant that has got a successful deal going on, you know, they've got a successful business, they've been in business a while, you find that their time, they understand the value of their time. So when they're dealing with someone, they want to deal with someone who understands the value of that as well. It doesn't mean you have to be cheaper. You just got to be better. You got to be on your game. And you know, go ahead.
No, and I guess it just reminds me of a meeting that I had with a bank, probably 6 weeks ago. It's because they're talking about, you know, the credit card industry and you know, and how poorly customer service is done and all these different things, you know, and I looked at them and said, you know what? It just kind of dawned on me that in this industry, it's not that hard to be really, really good because everybody else is so bad.
Right. And
you know, all you got to do is apply yourself and just apply yourself a little bit, and you're better than 90% of them.
So true. So true. Well, and that's, so you guys know, just so you know, I mean, here's a couple of guys who've been doing this a long time, who are tremendously successful doing this, made a lot of revenue for themselves. And, the average Visa MasterCard agent out there, I mean, they have a 6 to 10 month life expectancy. And that's someone who's working it. There's a lot of people get in, they try to do a couple deals, and they leave. So when you do this deal right, and you follow a good model, you have a good marketing strategy, you're following up with these folks, you're establishing accounts and establishing relationships. One, you get a heck of an education. You learn how a lot of stuff works because there's a lot of moving parts to this industry, especially now with all the new different terminal types and all the other things that are out there. In how Visa and MasterCard with PCI, IRS reporting, chip and PIN, EMB, there's a lot of things to learn. So one, you get the experience by doing. And number two, longevity. I can't tell you, a couple doctors that we spoke with at this convention over the weekend had said, yeah, I signed up with a guy, he's no longer in the deal, I can't get a hold of him, I want somebody who's going to be around. I want to know my person. So a lot of what you're competing against out there, they're here today, gone to Maui. Because they haven't figured out the right model. All those other things that we constantly talk about, like, using a good marketing system, whether it be Connect or, 5x7 index cards, whatever it is. And when you hear guys like Bruce talking about how he sends out cards every year and he's constantly following up, and guys like Brian that are showing you how to get in and here's how I worked the bank deal. Those are the guys that are doing it. And what they're doing is what I would do what I would do now, having done it, and being new in an industry. I'd go, all right, what are the successful guys doing? And there's two real successful guys that have kind of laid out what they're doing. Does that all make sense, especially for your newer folks? So and again, I know I've said that it's remember a couple things. One is it is a relationship business. You got to have a relationship with whether it be your merchant, it's one-on-ones, whether it be with the banks you have a relationship with, the associations, the software companies, whomever you're doing joint ventures with. You've got to court them constantly. You got to be in there. You got to be talking to them. And that will build that longevity for you, where you can make a heck of a good living if you do it right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up. If there's any questions about that stuff, dynamics make sense?
Yeah, Chuck, I'm all about building a relationship with banks and stuff, but what do you do when you relationship with a bank?
What do you do? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last piece.
What do you do when you don't have a relationship with a bank or a banker or somebody that's going to get your foot in the door? I mean, I try it, and they just...
Well, and here's the deal. This is one thing that I used to struggle with when I first got into this business is that, because what I came from before I came into this deal, every sales thing I had, I would deal directly with the end user, and I always made the sale happen right on the spot. It was easy. And then what happens is when you start building joint ventures, and those have longer sales cycles to them. So you have to be patient, number one. I'm going to give you an example. I used to call on banks, and there was this guy out in Montevideo, Minnesota, which is probably about 2 hours west of the Twin Cities. And this guy, so what I did is I called banks. I just strapped in and called them. And I said, look, here's what I do. I can handle business that your current provider can't handle. And I said, I just want to get my information over to you. And, and there's a little more to it, but I'm just giving you the kind of the gist of it. And this guy, his name was Richard, but he went by Dick. And I still to this day don't understand how you get that. But he was a total he was a jerk. But every other month, even though I knew I was going to get on the phone with this jerk, I called him. Every other month. And I probably called this guy for 16, 17 months in, every other month. And then one day out of the blue, he calls me. And he's like, hey, this is Dick over at blah, blah, blah bank in Montevideo. And I says, oh, hey. And obviously I remembered him because he was such a jerk to me every time I called him. And he goes, hey, I've got this merchant. It's the wife of our biggest customer. And she wants to start an online business, and our current provider does not process for people selling products over the internet. And I thought, great. Hey, here's my time to shine. Here's my time to show him and help him out. Ended up helping the woman out, helped save or keep his largest customer happy. But I think the biggest lesson I got out of that was that even though I knew it was going to be a relatively uncomfortable conversation, I still called the guy and kept chiseling away and chiseling away. And I know Brian had a bank deal. How long did you work on the bank deal you just got?
5.5 years.
5.5 years. But now let's look what's transpired with it. You've written, 30 accounts right out of the gate with it, right? And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think you got the two confused, but the one that I've got going right now wasn't the 30 one. We're just doing the paperwork on the next one, and it's 5.5 years, and the thing is I was always there.
Right.
Every 90 days, whatever, I'm there. I'm there. Finally, when they're ready to finally get off their ass and do something, who are they going to use? The guy that's always there. They're not going to go looking all around when they've got a simple solution right there in front of them. It's just a matter of the fact that EMV is such a wonderful thing right now that the banks, they're all stressed out about all the cards that they are going to have to do, all the work that's going to take. The last thing they want to do is run around replacing credit card machines and retraining merchants, and they're looking to dump that. That's just, who do they trust?
Right.
Well, let me pop in for a second here if I can. And this is just getting back to that question of how do I get into these places? I think when we take a look at it, and I'll just throw out 2 or 3 examples here of joint ventures that we have and how we got into them, is, since we started talking about the Optometric Association, the whole reason that door ever got open for us is we wrote the merchant account for one of the members and then got the referral into the association. I know a couple of the things we have on the software side of thing. I don't know if Mark's on the call or not, but Mark's done a couple of joint ventures, one with a jewelers association where we wrote a couple of jewelers and then got a referral into that association.
Exactly.
And so I think the answer that I want to give to, I didn't catch who was asking it, but you have to go about and do your sales. And like last week we talked about referrals. You never know who's going to open the door for you. And so you have to go about your business and write the accounts, but then you have to look for those opportunities and the places that they can get you into. Because it's not everybody is related to a banker or has a good friend that they golf with that's the bank president. Those are few and far between, but you're going to write accounts with people that are very well connected. And so it's
exactly
getting in and building that relationship with that merchant and that trust, and then all of a sudden some of those other doors get opened up for you. Does that make sense?
Chad, I can tell you quick.
That was well said, Chad.
Yep.
Chad, I can tell you quick if you there?
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's basically it wasn't the association. It was I went to a lawn care company. It's an organic lawn care to get their account, and I ended up writing their account, and they said, you know what? I have a friend that does vacation rentals in Surf City. She has a small business. You should try going over there and talking to her. So they didn't even call there. I just went over there. And then, I talked to her, and she said she'd like to try it. And then when I called the software company attached to it, they said, something, we've been looking for somebody to have a joint venture. We've been looking for somebody. So from a stupid lawn care place who was doing not that much a month, it turned out to be a huge thing going from there to there. But it's the right place at the right time. But that's because you're out there doing your job. If you're out there, you get things like that. It's timing.
You got to ask the right question.
Yeah, if you're not out there, though, you're not getting them. So you'll get those things, but it's timing, too. Timing is important. But anyways, it came from nothing. So that's, like Chad said, you can get them from anywhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be going after. If you don't know somebody, you pick up things from other people that, sometimes you get big things.
Right. And the thing about it is you don't know who other people know. So you got to, like Brian was saying, you got to ask the right questions, and never underestimate who you're dealing with, because you would see the most unlikely suspect that would be best friends with the bank president, and it just wouldn't register with you. You just don't know. So you want to give your best every person you're dealing with, and do whatever you can, look good to them, because you've done the right thing the whole time, because you don't know who they know. And so, but right, you got to get out there. This is a contact sport, and I think a lot of people think that I'm just going to go out and I'll make 4 or 5 calls this week, and then they expect things to happen for them. And this deal doesn't work like that. This deal is like you're making 4 or 5 calls in the morning, 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I mean, you're touching base in calls, maybe on the phone, in person, following up. You need to create a system. And every one of these guys that have spoken today have their system that they use. They spend X amount of time following up with existing merchants. They spend X amount of time prospecting, X amount of time, making sure that they're, touching base with their affiliates or their joint ventures. You got to have structure. You can't go about this deal and have success by just whimsically just going out and kind of, well, you know what, I'm going fishing today, so I'll stop by the bait shop and talk to them about their credit card processing too. You can't run this deal with any high level of success doing it like that. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, treat it like a business. That's the beauty of being a 1099 person, is this is your business. So
you do have to calling, right?
Go ahead. You what?
You have to do some cold calling. Nobody wants to use that word, but I run out of people to talk to if I don't cold call. And everybody says that's a...
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. At some point, you will do some cold calling. I mean, it depends on how connected you are when you got here, too. I know guys that get into this business that they know, because here, do you know why people have to do cold calling? Because here's the harsh realities of it. Let's rewind the clock. Say we're fresh out of high school, college, whatever was your deal, and imagine if you like every person that you kept in contact with, you put in a database. Imagine that. So how many people do you think you've met in a lifetime?
A bunch.
A bunch. So imagine if everybody that you had a good, conversation with, that you kind of connected with, imagine if you put them in a database and you drip marketed on them somehow. And I'm not saying even if you weren't trying to sell them, just trying to stay in contact. You would never cold call a day in your life because you've met a bunch of people in your lifetime. So So what happens is some people are naturally really, really good at that. When I was younger, I wasn't good at that at all. I'd meet people and then I'd never see them again. I mean, that's just the way it was. But as I've gotten older and I realized the value of relationships, and I've flown a lot for work, and I've met a ton of people sitting next to them on an airplane. I'm a conversationalist. I like to talk. So I strike up a conversation. I learn all about them. You trade business cards. You stay in contact. Then they're not cold. But see, most people don't operate that way. They just kind of, because most people, and I can't say what most people do, but I can say this because I see what people do. And hardly anyone does the warm contact stuff with folks. They may go out. A good example is a friend of mine was describing this story to me. He says, yeah, my girlfriend and I went out and met her long-lost friend from high school. And, yeah, I was, talking, her friend's husband was a pretty good shit. He says, we had a great conversation, blah, blah, blah. And I go, did you get his contact information? He goes, no. And I go, why not? He goes, I don't know. And I go, imagine if he'd have got his contact information and even once in a blue moon sent out a text on something or sent out an email when it comes time to use a service that this guy has or sell this guy something that you sell, he'd be a warm contact then. He wouldn't be cold. So it's everybody you run into, because, again, you don't know who people know. And just because they're not a merchant doesn't mean they don't know merchants or they don't know the bank president or their brother's not the president of the, California Dental Association. You don't know. So you never want to not follow up. Have you ever done what's that?
But that makes a lot more sense because it just made a couple bells in my head. I do know a million people. I sell at the flea market and now I just got to figure out how to let all the people that know me from the flea market just buy the big fat brick, I sell credit card business.
Yeah, I'd be.
Yeah, if they don't know what you do,
how can they refer?
They have to know what you do.
Yeah.
Well, I remember.
Put it on a stupid-looking T-shirt and wear that to the flea market. I mean, whatever. They'll know what you do, and they'll tell people. That's how people are. They love to tell people other people's stuff.
And what's funny? Just wrote a what?
Just wrote a deal this week from a client that I've had for 5 years at the flea market. And in conversation, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, she told me she was opening up a store up in Grand Lake, Colorado, which is a beautiful little resort town that kind of stuck in the 50s. But she's kind of opening a high-end thrift market is basically what it is. But I wrote her because of doing business with her for 5 years. She knows me, she trusts me, she likes me. And in the conversation, she told me she was opening a store. Her stuff had already been delivered from the bank to her location, and she canceled it to go with me.
Nice.
Well, I guess I do know.
Well, there you go, and there's the power of relationship. And that's where, you ever see, I was on 2 flights when I flew back from Florida to do the deal with Cam. I was on 2 flights, and it was such a contrast because on the first flight, I sat next to a guy that was, he sold campers like high end those buses that are like $900,000, but it's like a camp or like an RV kind of thing. So he sold those, and he was doing a deal down in Florida, and him and I hit it off really well, and we're talking and chatting, and you could see the guy's got shit going on. It's like, yeah, I can see why you're really good at your deal. I can tell by communicating with you. And then the next guy I sat next to on the flight from Atlanta to Minneapolis, we didn't say 2 words the whole trip. Most people are so lost in their own heads, they don't even pay attention to what's going on around them. I mean, you don't know who you're sitting next to. You don't know who you're meeting. You don't know that. You've got to. I think in sales is you've got to be really good at just you're constantly building rapport with everybody, and then when you find out who you're dealing with, you decide how far you want to take that.
A, B, or C.
A, B, or C. That's exactly right. But the most important thing is you got to be open. This guy was super closed on the second flight, and by his mannerisms and in the way he conducted himself with the other people on the flight, I can imagine he's not very successful. So, you got to that's how you got to kind of run in this deal and be open and just build your database, and you'll never cold call.
I'll always cold call. Sorry.
Yeah.
I have to get away.
Well, sometimes cold calling's kind of fun. I mean, I cold call when I go into a merchant that I've never been in there. If I'm doing business, I guess it's not really cold because I'm doing business with them. But even if I'm looking and I'm not going to buy anything, I still hit them up about it. Hey, I figure I'm in here. Why not? And then once I find out their name, and they shoot me down, because most people do the first time when it's a cold call, that's fine because next time I come in, it's not so cold. It's warmer. Right. You know what I mean?
That's
so that. Mhm. That's another thing about cold calling is track, because each time you go in there, it becomes less and less cold. So anyway, all right. Any other questions today, guys?
No, I think that'll cover it.
Excellent. You know what? I appreciate you guys coming. Thank you very much, and I look forward to next week. So let's get out there and let's make some hay for you guys. Have a great day, everybody.
All right.